Captain Dae-hyun Kim stared out the window of his ship, the Horizon's Promise. Below him, the planet New Prosperity glowed like a blue jewel in space. 10 billion people lived down there. 8 billion were aliens called the Vextar. 2 billion were human. They had built cities together, raised families, and made a good life on this world. Dae-hyun had been a ship captain for 12 years. He had seen many strange things in space, but he had never seen anything that scared him. Not until today. The alarm started screaming at 0900 hours. His crew jumped from their seats. The ship's computer showed hundreds of vessels appearing from nowhere. They came out of quantum slipspace like sharks breaking through water. The ships were massive, dark, and covered in weapons. "Sir, those are Krillian Empire warships," his officer said. Her voice shook. 2,000 of them. Dae-hyun felt his stomach drop. The Krillian Empire ruled 40% of known space. They were reptilian creatures, cold and brutal. Everyone feared them, but they had never attacked a colony world before. There were rules. The Galactic Council had laws against this. "Open communication channels," Dae-hyun ordered. Maybe this is a mistake. But it was not a mistake. Every screen in the ship suddenly changed. A face appeared. It was Emperor Velkoth, the ruler of the Krillian Empire. His scales were black and red. His eyes were yellow and cold. When he smiled, Dae-hyun could see rows of sharp teeth. "People of the galaxy," the Emperor said. His voice was deep and rough. "You have become weak. Your Galactic Council talks and talks but does nothing. You make rules but have no strength. Today, I show you what real power looks like." Dae-hyun's hands gripped the armrests of his chair. He wanted to look away, but he could not. "The colony of New Prosperity will be destroyed," the Emperor continued. "Every building, every person. This is what happens to those who stand against the Krillian Empire. Watch and learn." The transmission did not end. The Emperor wanted everyone to see. The Krillian ships moved into position above the planet. They formed a grid pattern, spreading out to cover every part of New Prosperity. Dae-hyun tried to contact the planet's defense force, but there was no answer. The Krillians had jammed all communications. The first weapon fired at 0915 hours. It was a kinetic strike. A massive piece of metal accelerated to incredible speed. It hit the planet's shield, and the shield held. For a moment, Dae-hyun felt hope. Then 100 more weapons fired. Then 1,000. The shield flickered like a dying light bulb. After 3 minutes, it failed completely. The bombardment began. Dae-hyun watched the screens as cities turned to fire. The Krillians were methodical and slow. They destroyed one section, then moved to the next. They wanted this to take time. They wanted people to suffer. His crew stood frozen. Some were crying. Others looked sick. Dae-hyun felt rage building in his chest, hot and terrible. But there was nothing he could do. His diplomatic ship had no weapons. Even if it did, 2,000 Krillian warships would destroy him in seconds. "Someone has to help them," his communications officer whispered. "Where is the council? Where is the fleet?" Dae-hyun did not answer. He already knew the truth. No help was coming. 3,000 kilometers away, on a massive space station called Nexus Prime, Ambassador Yuna Park watched the same broadcast. She stood in the council chambers, a huge circular room where representatives from 848 different species gathered. Yuna had been Earth's ambassador for 5 years. She had negotiated trade deals, settled disputes, and made friends with aliens from across the galaxy. She believed in the Council. She believed in peace through cooperation. Today, that belief died. The screens in the council chamber showed New Prosperity burning. Some ambassadors looked away. Others watched with expressions Yuna could not read. Were they shocked? Sad? Or were they just calculating how this would affect their own interests? The council leader, a floating jellyfish-like creature called a Morvian, finally spoke. "This is a tragedy," it said through its translator. We must respond. What does the Council propose? Economic sanctions, said the Heptarch ambassador. Several others agreed. Una stepped forward. Her voice cut through the murmuring. Sanctions? 10 billion people are dying right now, and you want to impose sanctions? The Heptarch turned its multiple eyes toward her. What would you have us do, human? Start a war? Yes, Una said simply. Send the fleet. Stop this massacre. Silence filled the chamber. Then the Morvian spoke again. We will vote. Who supports military intervention? Una raised her hand. She looked around the chamber. No one else moved. 847 species, and not one would stand with Earth. The vote fails, the Morvian announced. We will proceed with economic sanctions. Una felt something break inside her. These were not her allies. They were cowards. Back on the Horizon's promise, the bombardment continued. It had been 6 hours. Daehyun's crew had stopped watching the screens. They could not bear it anymore. But Daehyun forced himself to watch every second. He memorized the faces of the victims shown in the broadcast. He counted the cities as they fell. He wanted to remember this. He wanted to never forget what the galaxy's leaders had allowed to happen. At 1500 hours, it ended. New Prosperity was gone. The planet's surface glowed red with heat. Nothing moved. Nothing lived. 10 billion souls had been erased from existence. Emperor Velkoth appeared on the screens one last time. Let this be a lesson, he said. The age of weakness is over. The Krillian Empire will take what it wants, and no one will stop us. The transmission ended. Daehyun sat in his captain's chair for a long time. His hands were shaking. His crew looked to him for orders, for comfort, for something that made sense of this horror. But he had nothing to give them. His communication console beeped. It was a priority message from Earth, encrypted and marked urgent. Daehyun opened it. The message was from Admiral Minho Choi, the commander of Earth's entire defense force. It was short, just 4 words. Prepare Protocol Omega immediately. Daehyun felt his heart skip. Protocol Omega was a myth, something whispered about in military academies late at night. It was the option that was never supposed to be used. The plan that assumed all diplomatic solutions had failed. A second message followed. This one was longer. Captain Kim, return to Earth immediately. Tell your crew nothing. What happened today changes everything. The Council voted for sanctions. Earth votes for war. Every ship, every weapon, every soldier, all of it will be used. No restrictions, no mercy, no surrender. The galaxy will learn what happens when you make humans choose between justice and peace. We choose justice. Daehyun read the message 3 times. Then he deleted it and stood up. Helm, set course for Earth, he said quietly. Maximum speed. Sir? His officer asked. What about our mission here? Daehyun looked at the screen showing New Prosperity's burning corpse. Our mission just changed, he said. We're going home, and then we're going to war. As the Horizon's promise turned away from the dead world, Daehyun made himself a promise. Every single person who died today would be avenged. He did not know how. He did not know when. But he knew it would happen. Humanity had been patient. Humanity had been peaceful. Humanity had followed the rules. Not anymore. The silence started on a Tuesday. Ambassador Una Park walked into her office on Nexus Prime and began packing her things. She had spent 5 years in this room, meeting with alien diplomats, negotiating treaties, and building friendships. Now she was putting everything into boxes like it meant nothing. Her assistant, a young Terran named Jisoo, stood in the doorway looking confused. Ambassador, where are we going? Jisoo asked. Home, Una said simply. She did not look up from her packing. But the council meeting tomorrow, there won't be a council meeting. Not for us. Una sealed the last box and finally met her assistant's eyes. Earth is withdrawing from the Galactic Council. Every human diplomat, every representative, every observer, we're all going home. The order came from the president an hour ago. Jisoo's eyes went wide. But we can't just leave. What about our trade agreements? Our alliances? Yuna laughed, but there was no humor in it. What alliances? When we needed them, they voted for sanctions. Sanctions against an empire that just murdered 10 billion people. That's not an alliance. That's a joke. Within 48 hours, every human had left Council space. Embassies were closed. Trade ships returned to Earth. Even the scientists at joint research stations packed their equipment and departed. The galaxy had never seen anything like it. Then came the silence. Earth stopped answering communication requests. The Sol system went dark, no transmissions in or out. Ships that approached were turned away by automated defense platforms. Even friendly species who tried to check on humanity received the same message. Access denied. Do not approach. On the third day of silence, the Krillian Empire issued a statement. Emperor Velkoth appeared on public broadcasts, looking smug. The humans have learned their place, he announced. They know they cannot challenge the mighty Krillian Empire. They hide in their little solar system like scared children. Good. Let them stay there. But behind Earth's wall of silence, something very different was happening. Agent Jiwoo Kang sat in a dark room deep beneath Earth's surface. Around her, holographic displays showed intelligence data from across the galaxy. She had been Earth's top spy for 7 years, running networks that the Council never knew existed. "Show me the data again," she told her team. The displays changed. They showed communication intercepts, financial transactions, and travel records. All of it pointed to the same conclusion. The Council knew, Jiwoo said quietly. They knew the Krillians were going to attack New Prosperity 3 days before it happened. Her second-in-command, a man named Quan, nodded grimly. 12 species received advance warning from Krillian sources. They said nothing. 3 of them actively helped by providing intelligence on the colony's defenses. Which 3? Quan pulled up images. The Heptarchs, the Morvians, and the Centauran Compact. They all wanted pieces of Vextar territory. The Krillians promised them mining rights after the colony was destroyed. Jiwoo felt her jaw tighten. The Morvian council leader had looked her in the eye and voted against intervention, knowing that their own species had helped plan the massacre. "Get this data to Admiral Choi immediately," she ordered. "He needs to know who we're really fighting." In orbit around Jupiter, Admiral Minho Choi stood on the bridge of the largest construction project in human history. The shipyard stretched for hundreds of kilometers, filled with vessels in various stages of completion. But one ship dominated everything else. The UAD's Retribution was 3 kilometers long and shaped like a spear. Its hull was made from materials that did not exist in nature, quantum-forged alloys that could withstand temperatures hotter than stars. Along its spine ran the Singularity engine, a contained black hole that generated more power than entire planets used. "How long until she's ready?" Minho asked. Colonel Tae-Jun Lee, who had been overseeing the final construction, checked his tablet. 2 weeks, maybe less if we skip some of the safety tests." "Skip them," Minho said. "We don't have time." Tae-Jun nodded. He was a soldier, not an engineer, but even he understood what they had built. The Retribution was not just a warship, it was a message written in metal and fire. It said, "Humanity will not be ignored." Elsewhere in the shipyard, Captain Nari Song was running her fighter pilots through combat drills. Her squadron, called the Valkyries, flew experimental craft that could jump in and out of quantum slipspace with incredible precision. "Again!" she shouted into the comm. "You're 3 seconds too slow on the exit. 3 seconds means you're dead." The pilots grumbled, but obeyed. They practiced the same maneuver over and over. Jump in, Fire all weapons, jump out. Speed was everything. The Krillian Empire had bigger ships and more firepower, but humanity would be faster. Nari had lost her younger brother on New Prosperity. He had been a teacher there, working at a school for both human and Vextar children. She had his picture taped to her cockpit controls. Every time she flew for him. Deep in the research division, Dr. Sorahan stood in a laboratory that did not officially exist. Around her, sealed containers held weapons that the Galactic Council had banned decades ago. "Show me the nanoplague results," she told Professor Hyunwoo Nam, her lead researcher. Hyunwoo pulled up a simulation. Tiny machines, too small to see, were programmed to attack specific genetic markers. In the test, they had been coded to target Krillian military personnel, specifically those with cybernetic enhancements that the Empire gave to all soldiers. 98% effective, Hyunwoo said. It spreads through air and water but dies after 12 hours. No long-term environmental damage, and it only affects the specific genetic profile we program. Civilians would be completely safe. Sora watched the simulation. Part of her felt sick at what they had created. But another part, the part that remembered the broadcasts from New Prosperity, felt nothing but cold determination. "Increase production," she ordered. "I want enough to cover every Krillian military installation in the Empire." That's enough to kill billions of soldiers," Hyunwoo said. "Good," Sora replied. "They started this. We're going to finish it." The weapons kept coming. Quantum disruptors that could tear holes in space itself. Temporal mines that could freeze time in a small area. Plasma weapons hot enough to melt starship armor in seconds. Railguns that could fire projectiles at relativistic speeds. For 63 years, Earth had been a member of the Galactic Council. For 63 years, humanity had agreed to limit its military development. They had signed treaties promising not to build weapons of mass destruction. They had smiled and nodded and followed the rules. They had also lied. Admiral Minho Choi gathered his command staff in a secure conference room. On the screens around them were the faces of Earth's president, top generals, and intelligence directors. "The Council thinks we're hiding in fear," Minho said. "Let them think that. Every day we stay silent is another day we prepare. In 2 weeks, the retribution will be ready. Our fleet will be at full strength. Our weapons are online. Our soldiers are trained. And then we stop being silent." "What's the primary target?" asked General Dong-Yun Shin, who commanded the ground forces. Minho smiled, but it was not a kind smile. "The Krillian Empire has 78 major military installations. We're going to hit all of them simultaneously. We're going to cut off their supply lines, destroy their communication networks, and cripple their fleet before they know we've started fighting." "And the Council?" asked the president. "They'll try to stop us." "Let them try," Minho said. "We're not asking for permission anymore." Agent Jiwoo Kang's intelligence network spread across the galaxy like invisible threads. Her agents, humans who had spent years posing as merchants, scientists, and laborers, began feeding information back to Earth. Fleet movements, weapon stockpiles, political divisions within the Krillian Empire. Every piece of data was analyzed, cataloged, and turned into targeting information. On day 14 of the silence, Commander Seokmin Bae took his ship, the Ghost of Terra, on a test run. It was the first true stealth vessel humanity had ever built. Using a combination of quantum phase shifting and electromagnetic dampening, it was completely invisible to every known scanning technology. Seokmin piloted it past a Krillian listening post just to prove it worked. The Krillians never saw him. He was 20 meters away from their sensors and might as well have been a ghost. When he returned to Earth, Admiral Minho Choi was waiting. "It works," Seokmin reported. "They can't see us." "Good," Minho said, "because you're going in first. When we attack, you'll hit their communication hubs. I want the Empire deaf and blind before the main fleet arrives." Seokmin saluted. He had volunteered for this mission knowing he might not come back, but he did not care. Like everyone else, he had watched New Prosperity burn. Some things were worth dying for. The silence stretched on. 16 days, 17, 18. The Galactic Council grew nervous. Some species suggested sending scout ships to check on Earth. Others argued humanity should be expelled from the Council entirely for abandoning their duties. The debate meant nothing. Earth was not coming back. On day 21, Ambassador Una Park sat in her new office in Geneva. She had traded her diplomatic chambers on Nexus Prime for a small room in Earth's military headquarters. The change felt appropriate. She recorded a message and sent it on every frequency the Council monitored. Her face appeared on screens across the galaxy. She looked different than she had 3 weeks ago. Harder, colder. "You voted for sanctions," she said. Her voice was calm but filled with ice. "We voted for war. The Krillian Empire will pay for what they did. So will everyone who helped them, and so will everyone who stood by and did nothing. You had a chance to do the right thing. You chose politics instead. Now you'll see what happens when humanity stops asking for permission." The transmission ended. In the Council chambers on Nexus Prime, 847 species watched the message in stunned silence. Then they began to panic. The war began in silence. Commander Seokmin Bey sat in the pilot's chair of the Ghost of Terra, watching his instruments as the ship drifted through space like a shadow. Around him, the Krillian Empire's communication hub hung in orbit over a dead moon. The station was massive, covered in transmission arrays and defensive weapons. 300 soldiers worked inside, routing military communications across 12 star systems. In 10 minutes, they would all be dead. "All teams report status," Seokmin said quietly into his comm. Around the galaxy, 40 other stealth ships responded. Each one was positioned near a different Krillian installation. Each crew was waiting for the same signal. "Ghost 7, in position." "Ghost 19, ready." "Ghost 34, locked and loaded." Seokmin checked his chronometer. 5 minutes until the attack began. He thought about the people on the station. They were soldiers, yes. But many of them were probably just doing their jobs, following orders. Maybe some of them had families waiting at home. Then he remembered the broadcasts from New Prosperity, the children burning, the screams that had echoed across communication channels. The Krillians had shown no mercy there. Humanity would show them the same kindness. "Execute in 3, 2, 1, mark." The Ghost of Terra fired every weapon at once. Missiles streaked through space, followed by plasma beams and railgun projectiles. The station's shields never activated. The attack came too fast. Within seconds, the communication hub exploded in a ball of fire. Across 12 star systems, the same scene repeated 41 times. Supply depots vanished. Military outposts went dark. Communication relays turned to debris. The Krillian Empire's network collapsed in the span of 6 minutes. In the Imperial Command Center on Krillian Prime, alarms started screaming. "Report!" shouted General Krath, the Empire's top military commander. "Sir, we've lost contact with installations across sectors 9 through 21. No response from any of them." "Technical failure?" "No, sir. We're detecting weapon signatures. This is an attack." General Krath felt his scales prickle with alarm. "From who? The Council finally grew a spine?" The technician looked terrified. "The signatures match human weapons technology, sir." For a moment, Krath thought it was a joke. Humans? The species that had run home crying after New Prosperity? They did not have the ships or the courage for this kind of assault, but the evidence did not lie. "Get me Emperor Velkoth," Krath ordered. "Now." While the Krillian Empire scrambled to understand what was happening, Captain Nari Song led her Valkyrie squadron on their first combat mission. 40 fighters dropped out of quantum slipspace directly behind a Krillian battlecruiser. "All wings! Fire at will!" Nari shouted. The fighters unleashed their payloads in a coordinated strike. Missiles hit the battlecruiser's engines before its shields could adjust. The ship lurched, spinning out of control. Before the Krillians could respond, the Valkyries jumped back into slipspace and were gone. The entire attack lasted 8 seconds. 3 minutes later, they appeared behind another Krillian ship and did it again. Then again. Then again. They were hitting the fleet like ghosts, impossible to predict or catch. By the end of the first day, Valkyrie's squadron had destroyed 11 capital ships and hadn't lost a single fighter. Nari looked at her brother's photo taped to her controls. "This is for you," she whispered. The Galactic Council's response came quickly. They sent urgent messages to Earth demanding an immediate ceasefire. They threatened sanctions. They called emergency sessions. They debated and argued and accomplished exactly nothing. Earth ignored every message. Some council species, worried that humanity might target them next, tried a different approach. They blockaded human trade routes, thinking economic pressure would force Earth to stop fighting. The Heptarchs positioned their fleet near human merchant corridors. The Centaurans did the same. It was the wrong move. Colonel Taejin Lee's orbital drop forces hit the blockading fleets like a hammer. Transport ships appeared in the middle of enemy formations, launched tens of thousands of armored soldiers directly at alien vessels, and then vanished before defense systems could lock on. The soldiers boarded the ships in vacuum, cutting through hull plating with plasma torches. The aliens inside were not prepared for close combat. Most surrendered within minutes. "Secure the bridge," Taejun ordered as his team moved through a Heptarch cruiser. "Non-lethal force only. These aren't the enemy. They're just idiots who got in our way." By the end of the week, Earth had captured 47 alien vessels intact. The crews were held as prisoners of war, but treated well, given food, medical care, and allowed to send messages home. The message was clear. Earth was angry at the Krillians, not the galaxy. But anyone who helped the enemy would be treated as the enemy. The captured ships themselves were sent back to their home worlds with a simple note: "Stay out of our way." Most council species got the message. The blockades ended. But Emperor Velkoth was not intimidated. He broadcast another message, his yellow eyes burning with rage. "Humans," he snarled. "You dare attack the Krillian Empire? You dare challenge us? We have prisoners. 100 of your kind taken during the New Prosperity occupation. For every military installation you destroy, we will execute 10 of them. This is your final warning. Cease your attacks or watch your people die." The transmission showed a holding cell. Inside were humans in dirty clothes looking terrified. Guards pulled out the first 10 prisoners, forced them to their knees, and executed them on camera. The broadcast went across the entire galaxy. On Earth, Dr. Sora Han watched the executions without expression. When it ended, she walked to her laboratory and gave a single order. "Activate all Prometheus weapons. Remove all restrictions. Full authorization." Professor Hyunwoo Nam hesitated. "Sora, you understand what you're ordering? This is—" "I understand perfectly," she interrupted. "They want to terrify us into stopping. Instead, we're going to show them what terror really means." Admiral Minho Choi received reports of the executions while aboard the nearly completed Retribution. He stood on the bridge, his hands clasped behind his back, staring at the view screen. Around him, his officers waited for orders. Some looked angry. Others looked sick. All of them wanted to know what came next. "Send a message to all fleet commanders," Minho said quietly. "Accelerate the timeline. We attack Krillian Prime in 72 hours. Not 2 weeks, not 1 week, 3 days." "Sir," his tactical officer said carefully, "the Retribution isn't fully tested yet. If the Singularity engine fails during combat—" "It won't fail," Minho said. And even if it does, we're still going. They wanted to teach us to fear them. Let's return the lesson. Across human space, the military machine shifted into overdrive. Ships that weren't quite ready were declared combat-capable anyway. Weapons that needed more testing were loaded onto vessels. Soldiers who should have had more training boarded transports. The Krillian Empire had made this personal. Humanity would make them regret it. Agent Jiwoo Kang's intelligence network fed a constant stream of data to the military. She knew where every major Krillian fleet was positioned. She knew their supply levels, their troop numbers, their defensive capabilities. And she knew something else. The Krillian people are not happy with this war, she reported to Admiral Minho during a secure call. Our agents inside the Empire say there are protests on several worlds. The civilians didn't want this. The Emperor forced it on them. Can we use that? Minho asked. Maybe. If we can prove we're not targeting civilians, it could turn the population against the Emperor. But that means being very careful about what we destroy and how we destroy it. Minho nodded. Tell Dr. Han to prioritize weapons that minimize civilian casualties. We're not here to commit genocide. We're here to remove a threat and punish war criminals. Meanwhile, a young woman named Hae-Yoon Yoon sat in a refugee center on Earth. She was one of only 47 humans who had escaped New Prosperity before the massacre. She had watched her entire family die in the bombardment. Her parents, her husband, her 2 young children. Now she spent her days giving testimony to military investigators. They wanted to document everything that had happened, every detail, every moment. Why? She asked the investigator assigned to her case. Why do you need to know what kind of flowers my daughter liked? What does that matter for the war? The investigator, a woman named Minji, looked at her with kind eyes. Because when this is over, we're going to make sure the people responsible face justice. And justice means remembering the victims as people, not just numbers. Your daughter matters. Her name matters. Her favorite flowers matter. Haeun started crying. Someone finally understood. The Krillian Empire scrambled to respond to the human attacks, but they were always one step behind. Their military doctrine was built on overwhelming force and direct confrontation. They had no experience fighting an enemy that refused to fight fair. Human ships appeared and vanished like ghosts. Entire supply convoys disappeared without a trace. Communication networks went down and stayed down. The Empire was bleeding from 1,000 small cuts, and they could not find the blade. Emperor Velkoth executed 5 generals for incompetence. It did not help. On the 3rd day after his broadcast, as promised, Admiral Minho Choi's fleet arrived at the edge of the Krillian Prime solar system. The Retribution led the way, flanked by 200 human warships. They did not hide. They did not sneak. They appeared in normal space and immediately began broadcasting on every frequency. Admiral Minho's face appeared on every screen in Krillian space. Emperor Velkoth, he said calmly, you wanted to teach humanity fear. You wanted to show us our place in the galaxy. Thank you for the lesson. Now let us show you what we learned. The Retribution's singularity cannon began to charge. The weapon drew power directly from the contained black hole in the ship's core. Space around the barrel started to warp and twist. The Krillian home fleet, 2,000 warships, moved to intercept. The battle for Krillian Prime was about to begin. The Krillian home fleet moved like a swarm of metal insects, 2,000 warships spreading into attack formation. They had superior numbers, superior firepower, and the home field advantage. By every logical calculation, they should win this battle easily. They were wrong. Admiral Minho Choi stood on the bridge of the Retribution, watching the enemy fleet approach. His tactical display showed the odds, 10-1 against humanity. His officers looked nervous. Some of them were young, fighting in their first real battle. All ships, Minho said calmly into the fleet-wide channel. Remember why we're here. Remember new prosperity. Remember that the galaxy watched 10 billion people die and did nothing. Today we show them that some crimes cannot be forgiven. Today we show them that humanity does not forget." He paused, then added quietly, "Fire at will." The Retribution's singularity cannon fired its first shot. The weapon tore a hole in space itself, creating a brief rupture in reality. The beam hit a Krillian battlecruiser at the front of their formation. The ship simply ceased to exist, not destroyed, not exploded, but erased from existence as if it had never been there. The Krillian fleet faltered. They had never seen a weapon like this. "Fire again!" Minho ordered. The singularity cannon needed 30 seconds to recharge between shots, 30 seconds where conventional weapons took over. Human railguns fired projectiles at a percentage of light speed. Missiles crossed the distance between fleets in seconds. Energy weapons carved through the darkness. The Krillians returned fire with everything they had. Their plasma cannons could melt asteroids. Their missiles carried warheads powerful enough to crack planets. The space between the two fleets became a storm of fire and death. But humanity had one advantage the Krillians did not expect. They were willing to get close. Captain Dae-hyun Kim, now commanding a frigate squadron, led his ships directly into the Krillian formation. Most species fought at long range where big ships had the advantage. Humans fought like wolves, darting in close where their superior maneuverability mattered more than raw firepower. "All ships focus fire on the lead dreadnought," Dae-hyun ordered. "Target their shield generators." 6 frigates concentrated their weapons on a single point. The Krillian dreadnought's shields flickered and failed. Before it could recharge, the Retribution's singularity cannon fired again. The dreadnought vanished into nothingness. While the battle raged in space, another attack was happening that the Krillians could not see. Jinho Park sat in a cramped room aboard a stealth ship, his fingers flying across holographic keyboards. He was Earth's best hacker, and right now he was doing something unprecedented, breaking into the Krillian military network while they were distracted by the space battle. "I'm in," he announced to his team. "Accessing defense platform controls now." Around Krillian Prime, automated defense satellites that were supposed to protect the planet suddenly turned their weapons on Krillian ships. Chaos erupted in the enemy fleet as they found themselves being shot by their own defenses. "Command network is compromised," shouted a Krillian officer on one of the ships. "Someone is controlling our systems." But by the time they figured out what was happening, Jinho had already locked them out of their own network. The defense platforms kept firing at Krillian vessels, guided by human intelligence. On the surface of Krillian Prime, Dr. Minji Kwan's nanoplague was deployed. Tiny delivery systems, no bigger than grains of sand, dispersed into the atmosphere. They were programmed with extreme precision. Target only Krillian military personnel with cybernetic implants. No civilians, no children, only soldiers. Within 2 hours, the Krillian military began to collapse. Soldiers fell unconscious as the nanomachines shut down their cybernetic systems. Officers who relied on neural implants for tactical data found themselves blind and confused. The military infrastructure fell apart like a house of cards. But unlike at New Prosperity, no one died. The nanoplague was designed to incapacitate, not kill. When Krillian soldiers woke up hours later, they would find their implants permanently disabled, but themselves alive and healthy. General Dong-hyun Shin led the ground assault. His troops came down in drop pods, landing in precise formations around military installations. They moved fast, securing weapon depots and command centers before the confused Krillian forces could organize resistance. "Remember," Dong-hyun told his troops over the comm, "we're here for military targets only. Any civilian who surrenders is to be treated with respect. Anyone who raises a weapon dies. Those are the rules." His soldiers followed orders perfectly. They had trained for months specifically for this. When Krillian soldiers tried to fight, they were put down with ruthless efficiency. When they surrendered, They were treated as prisoners of war, disarmed, secured, but not harmed. The contrast with New Prosperity could not be more clear. The Krillians had massacred everyone. Humanity was being surgical. Back in space, the battle was turning into a rout. The Krillian fleet had lost over 600 ships. The human fleet had lost 23. The mathematics of warfare had changed. Quality and tactics had beaten quantity and power. Captain Nari Song's Valkyrie squadron darted through the chaos, hunting Krillian command ships. They had learned to identify which vessels held high-ranking officers by their communication patterns. Every admiral they killed made the enemy fleet more disorganized. "Target acquired," Nari called out. "It's a fleet command carrier. That's where their leadership is coordinating from." "Take it down," responded the squadron's tactical coordinator. The Valkyries jumped into position around the massive carrier, 40 fighters against a ship 3 kilometers long. The carrier's point defense systems activated, filling space with defensive fire. 2 Valkyrie fighters were hit and destroyed instantly, but the other 38 got through. They fired everything they had at the carrier's bridge section. Missiles, plasma bolts, railgun rounds, all concentrated on one small area. The carrier's armor held for exactly 4 seconds. Then it crumpled like paper. The ship began breaking apart. Inside, Krillian officers scrambled for escape pods. Most made it out. Some didn't. Nari watched the carrier die and felt nothing. These were the people who had given the orders at New Prosperity. They deserved worse than this. On the planet's surface, something unexpected happened. Krillian civilians began coming out of their homes. They did not attack the human soldiers. Instead, they watched. Some even helped, pointing out where military bunkers were hidden. One old Krillian approached General Dong-yun cautiously, speaking through a translation device. "Are you here to kill us all?" the civilian asked, his scales gray with age. Dong-yun looked at him directly. "No. We're here to stop your military from committing more atrocities. If you're not a soldier, you're safe." The old Krillian's eyes widened. "But Emperor Velkoth said you would massacre us. He said humans were monsters who wanted revenge." "He lied," Dong-yun said simply. "We want justice, not genocide. There's a difference." Within hours, Krillian civilians were spreading the word. The humans were not killing everyone. They were only targeting the military. Children were safe. Families were safe. The Emperor had lied to them. Protests began in the streets. Krillians who had lost family members in the Emperor's endless wars joined Krillians who simply wanted peace. They marched toward the Imperial Palace, demanding answers. Inside his fortress palace, Emperor Velkoth watched his empire crumbling. His fleet was destroyed. His military was incapacitated. His people were turning against him. Everything he had built was falling apart. "Broadcast to all channels," he ordered his remaining loyal officers. "Tell every Krillian soldier to fight to the death. No surrender. We show these humans what true warriors look like." But almost no one listened. The soldiers had seen what happened to their comrades who fought. They had seen that humans offered fair treatment to those who surrendered. And they were tired of dying for an emperor who had brought this disaster on them. Agent Jiwoo Kang's operatives had been working inside the palace for weeks, posing as servants and technicians. When the order came, they acted with perfect coordination. They disabled the palace's shield generators. They unlocked secure doors. They led human strike teams through secret passages. Within 20 minutes, Special Forces soldiers were inside the Emperor's throne room. Emperor Velkoth stood surrounded, his guards unconscious from stun weapons. He reached for a pistol, but Colonel Taejin Lee was faster. The weapon flew from the Emperor's hand. "It's over," Taejin said. "You're under arrest for war crimes, genocide, and crimes against sapient beings." Velkoth laughed bitterly. "You cannot arrest an emperor. I have diplomatic immunity under Galactic Council law." "The Council protected you," Taejin agreed. "We don't care what the Council says anymore." They put the Emperor in restraints, and led him out of the palace. Outside, thousands of Krillian civilians had gathered. When they saw their emperor in chains, something shifted in the crowd. Some cheered. Some cried. All of them realized that the old order was truly over. The Battle of Krillian Prime lasted 8 hours total. When it ended, the Krillian military had effectively ceased to exist. The empire that had controlled 40% of known space was broken. But unlike what the Krillians did at New Prosperity, the planet still stood. Cities were intact, civilians were alive, children played in the streets the next day, strange as it seemed. Admiral Minho Choi broadcast a message to the Krillian people from the Retribution. Your military threatened to kill human prisoners if we did not stop fighting. They executed 100 innocents to make their point. We responded by destroying your military while sparing your civilians. Remember this difference. Remember who kills without mercy and who shows restraint. Remember who commits genocide and who seeks justice. Across Krillian space, billions watched the broadcast. They saw human soldiers giving medical care to wounded Krillians. They saw human engineers helping repair civilian infrastructure. They saw that humanity had been angry enough to destroy their military, but controlled enough to spare their people. It was not what their emperor had told them to expect. On Earth, survivor Haeun-yoon watched the broadcast with tears streaming down her face. Justice had been served. The people who had killed her family were defeated. And yet, somehow, humanity had managed to do it without becoming monsters themselves. "Thank you," she whispered to the screen. "Thank you for remembering that we were people, not just numbers. Thank you for making them pay without losing yourselves." Ambassador Yuna Park prepared for the next phase. She had a meeting scheduled with the Galactic Council. This time, she would not be asking for their help. She would be demanding they answer for their complicity, and she would not be going alone. She would be bringing Emperor Velkoth with her. In chains. The Galactic Council chamber had never been so quiet. Ambassador Yuna Park walked down the central aisle, her footsteps echoing in the massive space. Behind her came 2 human soldiers, escorting a prisoner in energy restraints. Emperor Velkoth shuffled forward, his once proud scales now dull and dirty. The being who had ordered the death of 10 billion now looked small and pathetic. 848 species filled the chamber. Some ambassadors looked away in shame. Others watched with barely concealed fear. All of them understood that something fundamental had changed in galactic politics. Yuna stopped at the center speaking platform. She did not bow. She did not show respect. She simply began talking. 3 weeks ago, I stood in this chamber and asked for help. 10 billion people were being murdered on live broadcast, and I begged you to intervene. You voted for sanctions, economic sanctions, against an empire that was committing genocide. Her voice was calm, but everyone could hear the anger beneath it. You told us military action was too extreme, too aggressive. You said the Galactic Council believed in peaceful solutions. She paused. Where was that peaceful solution when the kinetic strikes began? Where was it during the 6 hours of bombardment? Where was it when children burned alive in their schools? The Morvian Council leader tried to speak. Ambassador Park, we understand your anger, but... No, Yuna interrupted. You don't understand. You can't understand. Because if you truly understood what happened, you would have acted. But you didn't act. Some of you did worse than nothing. She activated a holographic display. Data filled the air, communication intercepts, financial transactions, meeting records. All of it pointed to the same conclusion. 12 species received advance warning that the Krillian Empire would attack New Prosperity. They said nothing. 3 species, the Heptarchs, the Morvians, and the Centauran Compact, actively assisted by providing intelligence on the colony's defenses. They helped plan a genocide because they wanted mining rights to the ruins. Chaos erupted in the chamber. The three named species immediately began denying the accusations. Other species shouted demands for proof. The council leader tried to restore order and failed. Agent Jiwoo Kang, watching from the observation gallery, allowed herself a small smile. The plan was working perfectly. Tear down the old order first, then build something better. Yuna waited for the noise to die down. When it didn't, she simply started talking again, her voice cutting through the chaos. Earth is formally charging these three species as accessories to genocide. We demand they face the same justice system that will try Emperor Velkoth. We demand accountability. The Council does not recognize your authority to make such demands, the Council leader protested. Then the Council is irrelevant, Yuna said flatly. Humanity will pursue justice with or without your permission. The only question is whether you want to be part of the solution or the problem. For the first time in Galactic Council history, a member species had openly defied the body's authority. No one knew how to respond. While the Council argued preparations were underway for the trial, Admiral Minho Choi had insisted it be done properly, with full legal procedure and rights for the accused. Humanity wanted justice, not revenge. The trial was held on Nexus Prime, but in a newly constructed court facility, not the council chambers. The prosecution team included lawyers from 15 different species, including several Krillians who wanted to see their former emperor face consequences. Survivor Haeyeon Yoon took the stand on the third day of the trial. She had been chosen to represent all the victims because she could speak calmly, even through her grief. My daughter's name was Nabi, she told the court. Her voice did not shake. She was 6 years old. She wanted to be a teacher like her father. On the morning of the attack, she asked me if she could bring flowers to her teacher. I said yes. She looked directly at Emperor Velkoth. She was carrying those flowers when your ships fired the first kinetic strike. The school was in the 3rd sector targeted. She did not die immediately. The bombardment was slow, remember? Methodical. She had time to be scared, time to cry for her mother. I know this because someone sent me a recording from her school's security system before the building collapsed. The courtroom was completely silent. You wanted to teach us fear, Haeyeon continued. You wanted to show the galaxy that you had power. You used my daughter to make a point. She was 6 years old, and she died terrified and alone because you needed to prove something. Emperor Velkoth said nothing. What could he say? The trial lasted 3 weeks. The evidence was overwhelming. Video footage, military orders with his signature, communications showing he had personally designed the attack to maximize suffering. The prosecution proved that New Prosperity was not a strategic target. It was chosen specifically because it was defenseless and would generate maximum fear. The defense argued that the emperor was simply following Krillian cultural norms, that warfare between empires always involved civilian casualties, that he had only done what countless leaders before him had done. The prosecution's response was simple. Genocide is not a cultural norm. Murder is not acceptable just because it has been done before, and power does not grant the right to kill the innocent. The verdict came on day 21. The jury, composed of representatives from 30 different species, including Krillians, found Emperor Velkoth guilty on all charges. The sentence was life imprisonment. No execution, no torture, just permanent removal from society. Humanity wanted to prove they were better than their enemies, even at the end. But the trial was only part of the larger change happening in the galaxy. Dr. Sora Han and Professor Hyunwoo Nam presented Project Reconciliation to the Council. It was an offer to share defensive technologies with species that could not protect themselves: force field generators, point defense systems, early warning networks. We learned something during this war, Sora explained to the assembled ambassadors. Power without the willingness to use it is meaningless, but power without restraint is monstrous. We're offering you the tools to defend yourselves. What you do with them is your choice. Some species accepted immediately. Others were suspicious, convinced humanity wanted something in return. They were wrong. Earth wanted nothing except a galaxy where new prosperity could never happen again. Captain Nari Song found herself in an unexpected new role: instructor. Species from across the galaxy sent their best pilots to train with the Valkyrie Squadron. Nari taught them everything she knew about combat flying, small unit tactics, and the importance of speed over raw power. One of her students was a young Krillian pilot named Kesh. His father had been a general who died in the Battle of Krillian Prime. He could have hated humanity. Instead, he wanted to learn from them. "Why did you spare our people?" Kesh asked Nari one day after training. "You had the power to destroy us completely. Why didn't you?" Nari thought about her brother, the teacher who died on New Prosperity. She thought about the children he had taught, both human and Vextar. "Because being able to destroy something and choosing to destroy it are different things," she said. "Your emperor chose destruction. We chose justice. That's the difference between us." Colonel Taejin Lee's forces became the foundation of a new galactic peacekeeping organization. Species that had been oppressed by the Krillian Empire asked for help establishing their own defense forces. Taejin's soldiers trained them, not to conquer, but to protect. The three species accused of complicity in the New Prosperity massacre eventually faced consequences. The Heptarch's government collapsed when their people learned what their leaders had done. The Morvian Council leader resigned in disgrace. The Centauran Compact paid massive reparations to survivors and issued a formal apology. It was not enough. Nothing could ever be enough. But it was accountability, and that mattered. Ambassador Yuna Park proposed the Accountability Accords to the Galactic Council. The proposal was simple but revolutionary. Any species committing genocide would face immediate intervention by a coalition force. No votes, no debates, no politics, just action. The debate lasted for months. Many species worried it would be abused. Others argued it violated sovereignty. Some said it gave too much power to the military. Yuna's response was always the same. Would you rather have a system that sometimes acts too quickly, or a system that watches 10 billion people die and does nothing? Eventually, the accords passed by a narrow margin. The galaxy had changed. Slowly, reluctantly, but it had changed. The Krillian Empire was formally dissolved. Its territory was redistributed to the species the Krillians had conquered and oppressed over centuries. Former slave worlds became independent nations. Species that had been forbidden from developing technology were given resources to rebuild. Earth claimed nothing. Not one planet, not one mining right, not one strategic advantage. The galaxy noticed. "Why?" asked a Vextar diplomat during a reconstruction meeting. "You won the war. You could take whatever you want. Why are you giving it all away?" General Dong-Hyun Shin, who now oversaw reconstruction efforts, shrugged. "We didn't fight for territory. We fought because what happened at New Prosperity was wrong. Taking spoils of war would make us conquerors. We're not interested in conquering. We're interested in making sure this never happens again." Captain Dae-Hyun Kim returned to New Prosperity 1 year after the massacre. The planet was still dead, its surface scarred and lifeless. But humanity had built something there. A memorial covered the entire equator, a wall of black stone stretching for thousands of kilometers. Carved into it were 10 billion names, every person who died, every life that was lost. Each name included their age, their occupation, and a brief description of who they were. Nabi, age 6, student, loved flowers and wanted to be a teacher. June, age 34, engineer, built bridges and told bad jokes. Hana, age 72, grandmother, made the best kimchi in the colony. On and on the names went. 10 billion people remembered not as statistics, but as individuals who had lived and laughed and loved. Every human ship that passed the planet was required to sound a bell. 10 billion times. It took weeks to complete. Crews took shifts, maintaining the tradition. Each ring was a promise. We remember. We will always remember. Ambassador Una Park stood before the memorial during the dedication ceremony. Thousands had gathered. Humans, Vextar, even some Krillians who wanted to honor the dead. The galaxy tried to forget these people, Una said. They voted for sanctions and thought that was enough. They wanted to move on, to pretend this tragedy was just an unfortunate event in history. We refused to let them forget. She paused, looking at the endless wall of names. This memorial will stand for 1,000,000 years. Long after we're gone, long after our empires have risen and fallen, these names will remain. And anyone who looks at this wall will know what happened here. They will know that 10 billion people died. They will know that the galaxy did nothing. And they will know that one species decided that was unacceptable. Admiral Minho Choi stood in his office on Earth, looking at a picture of his daughter. She had been a doctor on New Prosperity, running a clinic that treated both humans and aliens. She had believed in the Galactic Council, in cooperation, in peace. She had been wrong about the Council, but she had been right about peace being worth fighting for. A message came through on his terminal. It was from Agent Jiwoo Kang. Intelligence suggested that another empire in a distant sector was considering aggressive expansion. They had seen what happened to the Krillians and thought they could do better. Minho looked at his daughter's picture one more time. Then he sent a simple response. Monitor the situation. If they attack civilians, we respond immediately. No warnings. No negotiations. They get one chance to do the right thing. If they choose violence, we choose justice. The message was clear. Humanity had learned its lesson. Hope for peace, prepare for war, and never ever let genocide go unanswered. Outside his window, the orbital shipyards were busy, not building weapons of conquest, but vessels of exploration, science ships to study distant stars, medical ships to help worlds in need, trade ships to connect species in commerce. But each ship had weapon systems installed, defensive shields at full strength, crews trained in combat. Because humanity had learned another lesson, too. Peace is not the absence of strength. Peace is having the strength to defend it. The galaxy was different now. Not perfect, not ideal, but better. And if anyone forgot what happened when peace was abandoned, they only had to visit New Prosperity, stand before that wall of 10 billion names, listen to the bells ringing, and remember,